Recording. Okay, Yafi. Good morning. Boker tov, everyone. So we are back in Masechet Beitzah. We're on Daf Hey Amud Alef. So yesterday we saw this case, this third case, just before we get back to pick up from Davar Shebeminyan. That's where we ended off yesterday. But before that, we saw the case of 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Right? Rav and Shmuel both said that Beitzah shnoda bazeh asura bazeh because it's not a safek, it is a chok kavua. It is a yom harichta. It's established as 1 day, not out of a safek, because we saw, because of this takana, that originally the edim could come the whole day, but pam achad nitkalkulu alavim bashir, and then they said, okay, the edim only will accept them after before mincha. If they come after mincha, they come later in the day. So then you'll accept them in the sense that the same day you continue to do Isur Malacha, but only the next day will be counted as Rosh Hashanah and as Rosh Chodesh. And then we saw the Mishnah said that once Mishachav Beit HaMikdash, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai established that they should go back as it originally was, except they do Chodesh Kol Hayom Kulo. So then the question was, does the din of the Beitzah go back as well? So opinion number one was Rabbi. And Rabbi said yes, that it changes. We saw this machloket between Rabbi and Abaye, and that was one answer. And then Rav Yosef came along and said no. He said even after the takana of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Beitzah is still going to be asura. Why? Because it was a davar shebeminyan. Called davar shebeminyan atatzach minyan acher lahatiro. So just before we carry on with that, we saw very top of the Amud, it says that the whole reason why they had this gzera in the first place and they wouldn't accept the edim was because pam achad nitkalkelu alevim bashir. So Simcha asked the question yesterday. Don't understand. That's the problem. If they're going to say the wrong shil shel yom, what about the fact that the korban, they're going to get the korban wrong? They have to bring the korban musaf, right? So that is the question which Tosfot asks. Tosfot asks, and actually there's something very interesting in the Rambam. We'll see in a moment. So if you have a look at Tosfot, the first Tosfot on the daf, nitkalkulu alevim bashir. Won't read the whole thing, but maybe about a third of the way down, it says, the lines of Tosfot get a bit shorter, so about the fifth narrow line. In my Gemara it says, Vikshar Rabbeinu Peretz, Va'ika kilkul gabe musafim. Right? You're worried about the kilkul of the shir. What about the kilkul of the musaf? That seems to be much more problematic. It says, why are they only concerned about regarding the korban tamid and the shir? This is the greater problem. If you say that the edim come after mincha time, so at 9.5 hours at mincha ktana, that is when they bring the second tamid of the day. So if they've already brought the tamid, you can't the afternoon tamid. You can no longer bring the musaf. So you're going to miss out on bringing the korban musaf. That's going to be a kilkul. So Tosfot gives a couple of answers. We'll see in a moment. But let me share with you for a second the Rambam over here. So there's a short piece which was written by Rabbi Hanan Porat, and it was republished a couple of years ago on the occasion of his 10th yahrzeit in Hamayan. And he has a very interesting explanation. Let me put it up for you. He says the following. Screen. Okay, so you have a look here. We have the Rambam. This is the Rambam in Ilchot Kiddush HaChodesh. The Rambam writes like this, based on our Gemara. He says, "Barishana yuma kablim leitut hachodesh kol yom shloshim." This is talking about Tishrei, talking about Rosh Hashanah. Originally, or at the end of Elul, they would receive on the 30th day of Elul. They would receive the Eidut HaChodesh the entire day. Pam achad nishtu eidim lavo ad ben ha'arbaim. Okay, it happened on one occasion that the eidim came late, all sounding very familiar. V'nitkalkelu b'mikdash v'lo yadu ma yasu. Very interesting. The Rambam here does not say nitkalkelu alevim bashir. Listen to what he says. He says the Levim got it. In the Mikdash they got it wrong, and they didn't know what to do. Im yasu olah shel ben ha'arbaim shema yavo ha'idim. Should they bring the olah, i.e. olat tamid? Should they bring the korban tamid now at mincha time because maybe maybe the witnesses will come, and therefore they shouldn't bring it. It should be you cannot bring the korban musaf after you've brought the tamid. The tamid is the final offering that's brought in the day. So therefore, he says, "Amdu beitin v'tkinu shlo yom mekablin et chodesh ela ad mincha." It's familiar as well. The Beit Din came and they made that establishment, which we're going to talk about now. They established it b'minyan. You can't unestablish it without another minyan. But they said that you can only accept the edut until mincha. Kadei she'eh shut bayom la'akriv musafin v'tamid shel ben abayim v'niskahem. In order there should be enough time in the day that they know, and they can bring the korban musaf, and they can bring the korban tamid, and all the accompanying libations, etc. So okay, the Rambam seems to make more sense intuitively to what we'd expect. The problem is, Rambam goes against the Gemara. The Gemara says explicitly, "Nitkalkalu aleviyim bashir." Right? We saw this yesterday. We started off that the Leviyim had the wrong. They said the wrong shir shel yom, which is accompanying the korban tamid. But the Rambam says, no, the reason they changed it, no mention of the Leviyim, no mention of the shir. He says there was a problem here because of the korban. They weren't able to offer the korban musaf. So the Rambam makes sense, but it seemingly goes against the Gemara. And this is what the Mefarshim say. For example, the Lechem Mishnah, you can see it here, where it says footnote number 1, make it bigger. It says the Lechem Mishnah, Teima, Amai kama bagmal ashkel kelu bashir, lema shelo kivu musaf hayom, she'eh efshar laklivu achal tamid shel ben abayim. This is the same question Tosfot asks. Don't understand. Why does it say in the Gemara they got the shir wrong? Why doesn't it say they couldn't bring the korban musaf? Right? Ve'im ikrivu korban tamid shel ben abayim yivdu a musaf. Once you've brought the korban tamid, then you've lost the musaf. By the way, all this is related to a question which comes up, which is what happens if you're in your davening. If you daven late on Shabbat, on Yom Tov, you get to mincha times. You daven mincha first, musaf first. That's all learned that based on the korbanot. But in any event, so he quotes here the Tosfot asked the questions. If you have a look in Tosfot, as I said, Tosfot gave 2 answers. One answer that Tosfot gives is essentially, without saying it inside, I'll just mention, is that essentially in a situation like that, it's extenuating circumstances. So for various reasons, he said, even if you had brought the korban, you'd brought the korban tamid, normally that is the final korban which you should bring. But here the witnesses come afterwards and say, actually, it's Rosh Chodesh, you need to bring the musaf. So says Tosfot, maybe you could bring the musaf in that day. Okay, he has a cheshbon of why that wouldn't work in the Rambam. The Rambam is going to argue with that. But that is one reason he gives. But he gives a second answer, which is quite interesting. If you have a look in Tosfot, maybe about 5 or 6 lines, but of the towards the end of the narrow lines in Tosfot, he says v'yesh mefalshim. So he says v'yesh mefalshim demeikala aitu atamid umatnu im lo yavo edim yei tamid v'im yavo yei min hamusafim. Okay, so says Tosfot, it's a creative suggestion. On this occasion where they weren't sure if the witnesses would still come or not, what did they do? They brought a korban al tanai, and they said, if the witnesses won't come, so this will be the korban tamid. If the witnesses will come, this will be the korban musaf, and we'll bring the korban tamid afterwards. Right? He says, "Yesh b'farshim neikar aitu atamid umatnu im lo yavo edim yei tamid v'im yavo yei min hamusafim." The witnesses won't come, it's a tamid. The witnesses do come, it's one of the musafim. Ve'achar kach yaviu et tamid, and afterwards they will bring the rest of the they'll bring the tamid v'shar korbanot and the rest of the korbanot. And then says Tosfot, he rejects this answer. He says, "V'lo ne'ira de'ika behedya hatam damul shir shachol im talmid shel ben abayim." He says that cannot be. It learns us out from the Gemara in Masechet Pesachim that when they brought the korban tamid, they would have to say the shira. They would have to say the shira with the korban tamid. In other words, you can't bring the korban al tanai because it's accompanied by the shira, and the shira reveals the fact that it's a tamid. If there's no shira, then it can't be the tamid. So suggests Rav Chanan Parat. He says this is the answer to the Rambam, and this is what the Gemara is really saying. He says the reason why we asked the 2 questions. Why did the Rambam change from the Gemara? Why did the Gemara say kilkulu bashir, and the Rambam says kilkulu korban? And furthermore, why didn't the Gemara just say that they kilkulu korban? So he says, this is the Rambam explaining the pshat in the Gemara. He says, the problem was that they brought the wrong korban. Why did they do that? The fact is, you couldn't come and bring the korban al tonight because you had to do the shiur. The shiur is what reveals that it's actually the korban tamid, and that's the reason why they had to get the korban wrong, and they couldn't do it. So Nikal Kalu Bashir is actually, the way the Rambam understands it, is code for saying they would have to do that by coming along and bringing the korban and doing the shiur. They revealed that it was a tamid and not a musaf, and therefore they weren't able to bring the musaf, and they got the entire korban wrong. So that's the way that he resolves the Rambam without Gemara. Okay, so
Rabbi Kenigsberg, wouldn't we expect there to be some discussion of the mitzvah of Tkiyat Shofar?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if there's some doubt about the first day, are they going to be doing the Tkiyot?
So they would. So they would do. So they would do. It's the same way that the Gemara said essentially that we do from the night before. And Rashi explained there would be an Isur Melacha because it might turn out to be Yom Tov. So you would have to treat it as Rosh Hashanah, and you would have to do, presumably they would have to do the Tkiyot in the morning. There's no, right, if they got it wrong and it was just Yom Chol, so there's no Isur of doing Tkiyot of Yom Chol, or essentially the same as any other Yom Tov Sheni that we have, where you do an extra day out of Safek, and we do the extra Tkiyot. So same thing here, it's just here it's in the reverse order. Normally, when we have Yom Tov Sheni Shogaliot, we have Yom Tov out of Safek, it's the second day, which there's a doubt about, that you think, just in case the first day wasn't Yom Tov, we think that the first day was Yom Tov, but in case the first day wasn't, we do the second day as well. Here it's the other way around. Because we think the second day, we'll know the second day is Yom Tov, but before we knew that, we thought the first day might be, so it was treated as Yom Tov as well. So yeah, presumably it looked like at that point, when it was a Safek, when they didn't know if the witnesses would come, for the matters of Tkiyot and Kiddush and everything like that, it probably looked like Rosh Hashanah. But they didn't know yet. Okay. So there we see. So that was when the Mikdash stood, and we said after the Churban, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai reversed this. He repealed this Gezerah, so therefore they would accept testimony the whole day because there was no longer concern of a Kilkul Bashir. But nonetheless, says Rav Yosef, the Beitzah would still be forbidden. Why? Because Kol Davar Shebeminyan Tzarech Minyan Acher Lahatiro. So we're a bit past halfway down on Daf Hey Amud Alef. Kol Davar Shebeminyan Tzarech Minyan Acher Lahatiro. Amar Rav Yosef, Mena Min Alach. How do I know this? So three sources. Number one, Dichtiv Lechem Olem Shuv Olachem La'olechem Ve'omer B'Mshochei Over Lahem Ayalu Bahar. Utnan, so we'll come back to those psukim later. Rashi actually says, he says, Lechamo lahem, lekaman mefarish la'achi Alef. Later on, the Gemara will explain how it's derived from Yah, v'omer b'mshochei yovel, lekaman mefarish. Later on, the Gemara will explain that one as well. So now, Utnan, Kerem Reva'i, haya olel Yerushalayim, ma'alach yom echad l'chol tzad, v'zoi tchuma. Okay, we have a few corrections here on the Masoret Hashas. Eilat min hadarom, Ve'akravat min hatzafon, Lod min ha'ma'arav, Yarden min ha'mizrach. Okay, so that Mishnah gives us a little bit of the, we're dealing with some of the borders of Eretz Yisrael. The truth is there's a lot of confusion with these borders in these places. That's why we have different girsaot, different manuscripts. Yeah, and the Masoret Hashas tells us differently. There's a long Tosfot at the beginning of Masechet Gittin that goes through and discusses a lot of these borders as well of Eretz Yisrael. And again, when you can imagine sitting in Bavel or sitting in the days of the Rishonim, trying to understand and work out where these places were was very, very challenging. Baruch Hashem, we are sitting here in Eretz Yisrael talking about it. But in any case, so we say like this, Kerem Reva'i. What is Kerem Reva'i? If you have a look just for a moment, the last line of Rashi, on this page, he says, Yesh plukta, chad tani neta Reva'i, v'chad tani Kerem Reva'i. Okay, there are two different opinions. The Gemara in Brachot, do we call it Neter Reva'i or Kerem Reva'i, which would mean these fruits that we're talking about, would it only apply to a Kerem? Would it only apply to a vineyard? Would it apply to all Perot HaIlan? But essentially, we know that fruits of a tree are, for the first 3 years, are orla. Orla meaning they are forbidden to, it's forbidden to eat them, it's forbidden to derive any benefit from them. It's one of the most stringent Isurei Achila, and generally speaking, Isurei Achila don't have a Isur Hana'ah with them as well. There are some exceptions. Orla is one of the exceptions. So for the first 3 years, it's Orla. In the 4th year, it is Revai. Revai means that it has to be brought to Yerushalayim and eaten in Tara. Alternatively, it can be, you can do a Pidyon over Samani, very similar to Maser Sheni. Maser Sheni, where we say the fruits have to be brought and eaten within the walls of Yerushalayim. Again, not the walls that were built by Suleiman the Great, but the walls of Yerushalayim, right, in the times of the Mishnah. And if you don't want to bring the fruits into, if you're unable to bring the fruits in, so you can redeem them on coins, and then that money has to be brought in, and they can be eaten in chulin. Only from the 5th year, the fruits can be eaten normally. So yeah, the Mishnah is talking about either kerem ravai or neta ravai, whatever it is, but it says, so anybody who was the distance of 1 day's travel in any of the 4 directions outside of Yerushalayim was not allowed to redeem the fruits of money. Those fruits of Revai have to be brought into Yerushalayim. Normally we say that you can choose. You can bring them in, or you can redeem them, and you can eat them in chulin, and the money can be used to purchase korbanot or whatever else. But no, if you are malach yom echad, a cold sad, you are within a day's travel in every direction, therefore it has to be brought in. So V'amar Ula, V'itay Marabba Babachana, says Ula, why? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'atam, what is the reason for this decree? Kedei la'ater shukei Yerushalayim bepelot, in order to adorn the markets of Yerushalayim with fruits. And if everybody's going to go and is going to redeem it and not going to bring in, it's not going to be so nice. But we want all these fruits to come into Yerushalayim to fill up the markets and fill up the streets and have this beautiful produce within the city. So now we're going to see how we learn from this the principle of Davar Shebeminyan. So Matan Kedei La'ater Shukei Yerushalayim bepelot. V'tanya kerem Revai haya lo Rabbi Eliezer b'mizrach Lud b'tzad Kfar Tavi. So Rabbi Eliezer, who was again within this distance, he had these fruits or grapes of that were within of Revai over the Amud. Ubikesh lafkiro la'aniyim. And he wanted to make them to be mafkir his fruits and give them to aniyim, give them to poor people. Why? Rashi explains, shiyilkatuhu that they should then take them, v'yalu Yerushalayim, and they should take them up to Yerushalayim, v'yochlu sham, and they can then take them and go and eat them in Yerushalayim. Shayalav torach la'alot shama perot. Okay, it was difficult for him. It was a torach for him to be able to go and take the perot out. In other words, what we see, this is still based on the Gzeirah. He was in Lud. He was within a day's travel from Yerushalayim. He couldn't just be poder the fruits and eat them where he was. So therefore he said, I'm unable to take them up to Yerushalayim, but I'm going to be mafkir and give them to the aniyim. So Amrulo Talmidav Rabbi, Kvanim nu alecha chavarecha v'hitiruhu. So the Talmidim said, Rabbi, they have already your colleagues, right, have come together and they have nimnu alecha. They've come together in a minyan. They've come together and they've changed this decree, right? They've allowed it. Says Rashi, that now you are allowed to purchase it, to redeem it, and to purchase with the money. Right, even though this was after the Churban, says Rashi. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on here. If this is after the Churban, so again, the whole din of bringing the fruits and being able to eat them within Yerushalayim, that only applies when Yerushalayim has got kedusha. It's got inherent sanctity, which clearly exists in the time when the Beit HaMikdash stands. The question is, after the Churban, after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, was there still in the first galut? Was that kedusha? Did that still apply? That is machloket in the Gemara, but Rabbi Eliezer holds by the opinion that it does. Okay, but the point is that after the Churban, so there's no longer any reason for this gzeirah of the markets, the streets of Yerushalayim should be filled. They aren't going to be. It's a time of distraction, time of churban. So, but even though the reason no longer applies, you see that without the hatara of the minyan, he would still have to fulfill this. So that's why Rabbi Eliezer said, "I'm unable to bring the fruits to Yerushalayim." The Talmidim said, "Well, you don't have to bring them because the Chachamim came and they hitira davash of minyan." So now the Gemara says it explicitly. So first of all, it says, "Man chaverecha Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai." Right, where it says, Rabbi Kvanim no ala chaverecha, your colleagues have come together and allowed it. Who are chaverecha? So that is referring to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. And it says, Tama de nimnu, ha lo nimnu lo. Meaning because they got together and the Sanhedrin essentially came together and changed this din, that is why it was allowed. But without that, it would not be. And therefore you see that this is a davar sheba minyan, tzrich minyan achel atiru. Okay, says the Gemara now. So that was the third proof. That was the proof from the Mishnah. Why do we have to bring that proof from the Mishnah? Why weren't the psukim enough? And what in fact did we learn from the psukim? So it says Mai v'omer. We're on the fourth line now on Daf Amud Bet. Mai v'omer. Meaning, why did it bring more than one proof? Hachi kama. This is what it means to say. Michtiktiv heyu nachonim l'shloshet yamim al tikshu elisha. Lech emor lahem shuvu lachem la'olechem lamali. Right, so this was the pasuk that we saw yesterday. It said on Amud Alef, Lech emor lahem shuvu lachem la'olechem. After Mamad Har Sinai, where it says, go and tell the people they can go back to their tents. Right, everybody was required to separate. All the families, all the married men and women were required to separate 3 days before Mamad Har Sinai, so that they could all receive the nevuah in a state of tahara. So this is what it says. It says, for 3 days, right? Be prepared and don't no man shall approach his wife. That is for 3 days before Matan Torah. And then there was so then it says afterwards, go back. You can go back to your tents. Why does it have to say that? Shma mina. We learn from that. In other words, the reason they were told to separate was because of Mamad Har Sinai. Mamad Har Sinai has taken place. Why don't we go back? Why don't we go back to that automatically? Why does it have to say, now you can go back? So that is like the equivalent of the Davar Sheba Minyan. It was Davar Sheba Minyan to tell them to separate, so we need it again to tell them to go back. Says the Gemara, you could say, no, maybe that's not a proof. Maybe that's not a proof because they were allowed to go back, but he had telling them, you have to go back. This is for the mitzvah of onah. And that's why the pasuk says, Lechem olem, shuvu lachem lo alechem. Not that it's permission, but that it is a mitzvah. So v'chiteim ala mitzvat onah udata. So therefore, tashma. Therefore, we'll bring another proof. If you say that's not good enough, because that's just for the mitzvah and not, it's not telling you that it's davar sheminyan minyan latiro. So from this pasuk, bimshoch hayovel heimayalu bahar. Okay, meaning when the bimshoch hayovel is referring to when the shofar is being blasted at the end, when it is the long the continuous shofar blast is blowing. So then that is when you can go up onto the mountain. We said before, when Mamad Har Sinai took place, no one was allowed to approach it. That mountain then had kedusha. As soon as the revelation was over, then they could go. So gamatzon v'abakar al yiru al muhar hahu. So again, the question is, beforehand, when it says that they can't approach, it says what? It says gamatzon v'abakar al yiru al muhar hahu, against that mountain, i.e. that mountain at the time when there is a revelation taking place. The revelation is finished, they could go back. So bimshoch hayovel lamali, why do I need this pasuk of bimshoch hayovel? Answer is shma mina davar shev minyan tzich minyan achel atiro. Again, the same answer. That is proof that things don't just go back, even though the reason no longer applies. Nonetheless, the gzerah, the decree, or the mitzvah still applies until it's explicitly said otherwise. So that was the first two psukim, and then says the Gemara v'chitema. And if you'll say now, hanei mile b'doraita, aval b'drabanan lo, so you're going to say this applies for davar sheminyan when it comes to a doraita din. But if it's a din drabanan, it's a rabbinic decree, that would not be the case. So tashma kerem revai. So here's the proof that when it comes to kerem revai or neta revai, as Rashi pointed out, right? That is a over here it's a din drabanan because it was because it was din drabanan that you weren't allowed to come and be podeh, etc. So therefore, we see from there you need a minyan as well. So chitei mane mile b'doraita b'drabanan lo tashma kem revai v'hakem revai b'drabanan. Maybe this is a din drabanan. V'kam rilei kvar nimnu alecha chavarecha v'tiruhu. That they said that the only reason it's allowed because they came along and they were matir b'minyan. Okay, so based on that, so those are the proofs. The Gemara has taken a little bit of a digression here to prove to us that kol davar sheb'minyan tatzarech minyan acher lahatiro. But now, and therefore, based on that, he says we never found that they had a minyan to come along and to change the din of the Beitzah. Therefore, even though the Beitzah, the Eidim can come the whole day, nonetheless, the Beitzah would still be forbidden on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So now it says, now the Gemara challenges that. It says, V'chitema Beitzah nami imnu ala. So, Ki nami imnu ala Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai v'shaluyah. So you're going to say, hang on a second. The whole point was, what was the davar shebeminyan in the first place? It was the fact that they came along and said that the witnesses can only come until mincha time. If the witnesses come after mincha, we don't accept them. We only count the next day as Rosh Hashanah. And as a result of that, the Beitzah is going to be forbidden because it's all one long day. And then we say Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai comes along and says, actually, after the Churban now, this is another minyan. We're allowing the witnesses to come all day. So when you allowed that as the davar sheminyan, maybe you allowed the Beitzah as well. That's the Gemara asked. It says Chitema Beitzah nami amnu ala Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai v'shaluyah. Maybe that was also counted as a davar sheminyan that they came back and allowed it. So the answer is no. Ki amnu aidut a Beitzah lo amnu. Okay, when they came along and they reversed the decree, reversed the enactment, they did it regarding Eidut, but they did not do it regarding the Beitzah. Okay, we'll stop there for today. Have a good day. Have a good Shabbat, everybody. Chanukah Sameach.
Chanukah Sameach.
Chanukah
Sameach.
Sameach. Chanukah Sameach. Good afternoon.